meeting and to keep your microphone muted, except when I invite you to speak. Please click the raised hand function if you wish to ask a question or a comment. There is always a risk that we may run into a technical problem, and I would ask for your patience if we do so. Should this occur, I would declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may have to be abandoned until such time as it can be recovered. Can I remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded and that these recordings will be published on the Council's website. Members, I'll begin the meeting by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your presence. Please confirm your presence. Councillor Ian Gardner.
Present.
Councillor Mike Shellings.
Only just, but here.
Thank you, Mike. We knew you were coming. Councillor David Seaton, I think we have apologies. Councillor Richard Robertson. No news yet, Dawn?
No, I have asked colleagues to call him now.
Thank you very much. Mr. John Walker.
Sorry,
Your mic is muted, John.
I've unmuted it. I'm here.
Thank you, John. Mr. Matthew Pink. I can't see Matthew on my screen. Is he still with us?
I think he seems to have disappeared.
Could we see if we can recover him? But I will come back to Matthew. And obviously, Mr. Lee Fanco.
I'm here, Chair, thank you.
Thanks, Lee, I can see you there. And obviously myself, Terry Rogers. Dawn, apologies for absence and any declarations of interest.
Apologies from councillors Downs, Hay and Seaton.
Right, thank you very much for that. And any declarations of interest, please.
Usual one from John Walker, Chairman.
Thank you, John. Anybody else wish to declare? If when we're discussing a agenda item, you think you have to declare an interest, please interrupt and declare accordingly. Thank you very much. Right, let's go then to agenda item number 2, which is the public meeting, the minutes of them held on the 23rd of July. And I'll go through these in the normal way, calling out the page number. If you have any comments or observations to make, please interrupt and I will hopefully see your hand and act accordingly. Page number 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. And page 9. I must advise members that the page numbering on the front agenda pages is incorrect, and that if you will give the correct pages of the confidential agenda pack, and I will give them to you before each item agenda is addressed. I'd also draw to your attention the email sent out by the officers as regards certain changes to certain items in the agenda, and they will be addressed by officers as and when we come to that particular item. Let's then go to the action log from the meeting in July. Paul, would you like to take us through the action log, please?
Sorry, the action log.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought that's okay. The action
Well,
log.
I mean, I'll take them through if you want me to, but normally...
Chairman, I'll if
I can do that because obviously Paul normally does the ISC action logs.
Okay.
But obviously,
No, that's
Okay.
all right. I mean, I could do it. It's only a couple of items, but sorry.
yeah,
No,
no,
then
it's-
Mark, sorry, that's very good of you, Mark. Thank you for that.
no problem. Yeah, so there was just a couple which are both completed. One was a query was raised when we talked about the statement of accounts, so we circulated an explanation of that, and then the second one you will see in this the administration performance report for this committee. We have included a description of the red, amber, green status.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's now turn to agenda item number 3, which can be found on pages 13 to 26 of the report. It's the administration performance report. Joe, I think you're introducing this. And the recommendation.
I'm going to pick this one up if that's okay, Chairman.
Michelle, okay, thank you. And the recommendation is to note the report. Just remember that, please.
Thank you. So, yeah, this is the standard administration report that we bring to you each meeting. There's not too much in the report this time to bring to your attention, so I'll just highlight the couple of sections in it for you. So in the main report itself, under section 5, breaches of the law, just to draw your attention to 2 breaches that officers are deemed to be non-material breaches. And the first one there, as you can see, letters have now been sent to the members, so that one has been resolved. And the second breach on there is a standard breach we bring to you due to the legislation, and there's just 2 refund of pension payments been paid outside of the 5-year period on that one there. So in terms of the main report, there's nothing else really to say on that. So if I can just draw your attention to the appendix, the only thing really to note on there is, as you will see, there's 1 amber KPI in relation to the maximum number of estimates. So just a bit of an explanation why that one was amber on there. As you can see, it was just due to a report that didn't run through as it should have done. This is now being thoroughly checked, so there's the reassurance there that that shouldn't happen again. And as we just alluded to with the action log there, the green, amber and red statuses are back in the report as well for you, so that you can see how that all relates. As you can see with the rest of the report, the contributions are looking healthy in terms of late payments into the fund. And on the private appendix, without mentioning any names, no real cause for concern with any employer on there. The one on the bottom of the list is obviously a very small employer, and we have been in discussions with that employer just to make sure that contributions are coming in on time. At the moment, they are, but obviously as a committee, just to let you know that if things start to slip again, we will obviously be in further discussions with them. But apart from that, they're the main items in the report, but I'm happy to take any questions if members have got any.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I will remind everybody that the appendix 4, sorry, people are interrupting. Appendix 4 is confidential, and if we wish to discuss that further, we'd have to go into private session, but I hope you will not. If we have somebody trying to join us, Dan.
Councillor Robertson's now joined us, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mike, you have a question?
Yeah, I've got a number, Chairman. On page 15, paragraph 7.1, we've got an original timescale for action on the cases that have only reduced slightly, and I just wondered what the forecast was there. And then the same question on contracted liabilities. And then when we get to page 20, if we go to page 19, I always get muddled up with my pluses and minuses. Investment income dropped against the estimate from 40,000 to 28,000, but I've got a 12,000 without a negative sign. And I just wonder if someone could explain that to me. And then finally on this item, on page 20, staff-related administration expenses analysis, vacancy factor lower than forecast due to COVID-19. And I don't understand that.
Thank
I'm
you,
happy.
Mike.
I was going to say, I think there's a broad number of questions there over different areas, and probably different people are best to answer separate bits. But Mark, are you happy to start with the undecided leavers bits to start with?
Yes, I mean, I can cover off this now. It's also in the business plan update. Sorry, could people mute if they're not speaking, please? Got a bit of an echo, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, broadly, the theme is we've managed to keep on top of business as usual, as you see from the green indicators across the board. What we've not been able to do due to the effectively people working at home, it's less efficient to work at home. They haven't got the same equipment, the screens, and also some of the backlog project work hasn't been able to kick off with Aon as well. We've not been able to get on top of some of the backlogs in the way we would have hoped. So certainly the delay is in that kind of operational work. And I think if I was to predict the future at the next committee, we would definitely be red on that area unquestionably, because what's happened after these figures have been produced is we've had the end of August produces a huge influx of extra cases, and they've actually made the situation even worse. So I think we are probably now red if I was to report this with today's information across that one. So I'm trying to keep not have any increase in numbers on that. In terms of the contract liabilities is a different one, because that was obviously related to HMRC's actions. So that wasn't particularly the actions of the admin authority. It was when we got information. The vacancy factor, the comment around that. So what's happened with staffing is I normally allow for 3 vacancies in our budgeting. Because of COVID, people haven't left. The long and short of it, and so therefore we've got more staff, a fuller establishment than I would have expected, and hence we've got a slight overspend across staffing, which is reduced a bit because obviously we obviously got less agency staff if we've got staff permanently employed. So that's the reason for the overspend there. We haven't got 3 people short of budget as I expected.
Aren't you lucky?
Well, we are. I'm very pleased to be overspending on that area. that's very true. But yeah, that's the reason. The investment income. Fiona, do you want to come in on that one about the negatives and positives? The £12,000 that was raised.
Sorry, my Zoom went small and I couldn't get it back up. Yes, so the investment income, there's a difference on the forecast because of COVID. We contacted the managers and they said that they're expecting around a 30% income decline. So the positives and negatives is, so we are under, so, oh wait, that is correct, isn't it? Oh, I think that actually should be a negative. Just looking at this again now.
Yeah, I've just looked at that. I think you're
Yeah.
right, Mike. I think we need to have a look at that one. So we'll make a note of that and take it away. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because I think that will also screw up the net at the bottom, won't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just checking them all through now, and I think there's a couple more that we need to just double check on that. So yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Apologies.
Oh, that's right. That's what we're here for.
Sorry, is that all? Was that all of the questions?
I think it was. It may have felt like more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for that. I don't see any other hands raised. Are there any more questions? If not, then I'd like to go back to the recommendation, which was the committee are asked to note the administration performance report. Are we all agreed to note? Thank you very much. I don't see any objections or anybody shaking their heads. Good, excellent. Let's then go to the next agenda item, which is
Sorry, Chair, before we go on to that, can I apologise for arriving late and also declare an interest in my usual way for my wife's pension?
Certainly, Richard, and welcome to the meeting. Not to worry, we've only just covered up to agenda item number 3, most of meet and greet, and then the administration report. Mike asked for very detailed questions and we provided some of the answers, I hope. I'm now on agenda item number 4. Pension Fund Annual Business Plan Update, page 27 to 40. And Mark, I think you're covering that one.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just go through the highlights rather than concentrate on every single activity. But yeah, just to characterize it, I think we've moved on, a lot of the strategic work, certainly in the investment space, but in other spaces as well. The bit we've, as I just mentioned, we've not done so well on is some of the operational, if you like, casework activities, for reasons I just explained. The business continuity plan, we did have a look at that actually as COVID was becoming, more and more of an issue, prior to the lockdown. So we did actually do some business continuity plan in there and updated the plan, but this is a full review, which you can see is underway at the moment. We have extended in 2.1.3 the pensions admin and payroll software contract now. So we have taken up that extension that's mentioned there, and we've brought the all aspects of the license coterminous, so the iConnect and the hosting arrangement as well. So we will be going out to a call off the national framework in future years, as explained there. If I move to 2.3.2 on page 31, we have been undertaking some work with the fund actuary around multiple investment strategies. So this is something we still would like to bring to you, to seek your views on it, with appropriate recommendations. We're just deliberating at the moment over effectively what is a offer for some additional work from Hyman's that's just come in, and we just need to look at that and the pricing of that. We'll certainly bring something more tangible to the next committee meeting around that. Mentioned 2.4.1, but that's the undecided leavers. As I say, I think we're now that probably is pushing towards red. Because I've not seen there was a small reduction. Aon had started working on it when we drafted this, but I don't believe that will be enough to actually make it on time, as I mentioned. Further in the report, I think things you will have recognised if you're on the ISC, some of the strategic work has been moving exactly really to the original timing. So things around the asset allocation, the development of the asset pool. Obviously, we've got a report later, but there have been delays at a pool level on getting some of those sub-funds up and running, but I'll let Paul talk about that when he does that report later. 2.5.3, page 34, we have just undertaken some interviews for an independent advisor. The outcome of that will be worked through over the coming days, but we hope to have an independent advisor in place very, very shortly. So that has progressed well, as I'm sure the chairman can attest.
If I may come in there, Mark, I'm just let the committee know, very interesting, spread over 3 days. We interviewed 7 very erudite and confident applicants. And we've had 3 very, very strong contenders at the end, and I'm very pleased with the exercise, and hopefully we've chosen the right person. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Responsible investment, obviously an incredibly important area that we are continuing to work through. We've obviously had the survey. We're moving obviously into the policy stage now and drafting that. And I you obviously will have seen a Councillor Robertson, sorry, circulated. So I think I think it was yesterday, wasn't it? Around the question that was asked, and I think he shared that just for information. There's clearly a lot of interest there around that subject. Understandably, we are taking it very seriously, and we are moving forward with that programme of work. I think that's probably the last one I'm going to pick up on. So I open it up to any
questions. If I may come in on your last statement, Mark, for committee members, if you are challenged by any individual or any other councillors or anybody who's interested, obviously, in climate change and things pertaining to that, we do have a response on record that you can rely on, and just send an email to Paul. I'm quite happy he'll share that response with you if you want to use it. Thank you, Mark.
Sorry, you've put yourself on mute again, Chairman.
Do apologise. Have we any questions then on the report?
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. Little hand's not up.
Yeah, and it was up, and then it seems to have come down again, Chairman. I'm not quite sure. When it was up, and when it was down, it was down.
So you're halfway then at the moment.
No comment. 231 on page 30. We've got, this is the digital strategy review. We've got a review will be carried out over a 3-year period, and we'll focus on blah, blah. Does that mean that there will be no changes until the end of the review, or are we going to have incremental changes as we walk through, which could lead to some confusion?
Well, we do. I mean, Corey, do you want to come in actually on this? I mean, I know what my views around this are, but you're
yes.
the one leading on this, aren't you? So
yeah, so the idea of this being a 3-year program is because some of the work will take that long to complete, but there are different projects going on at different times throughout that. Obviously, some of the work that we wanted to do on that area has been halted at the moment because of COVID and reacting to that. But actually, some of it's also been accelerated because of that as well. So the move to digital communications and things like that. So we will be bringing discrete parts of that at different times to the committee and undertaking that review in the earlier part of that 3 years, but recognising it will take that long to implement some of them.
That's lovely, thank you. Can I leap to 2.5.4, where we've got a reference to training and RI and so on? I would simply point out that with the currently scheduled elections, which may or may not take place, there could be significant changes in personnel, and we would need to take that into account when we decide when to invest in training.
yes, noted. I mean, I guess there's two things really. One, if we are bringing decisions, we need to make sure the training is there in order for that decision to be made, and that does unfortunately mean sometimes even if someone is going to step down, they do need to be trained in order to make a particular decision. But beyond that, obviously there's a wider program of training that will bring collectively the committee's knowledge up to date in any area. Okay, thank you.
I rest, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Shellings. I can't see any other hands up, but any questions for anybody? Very quietly. Can I then refer us to the recommendation, which is asked to note the business plan update to the 31st of August of 2020. Are we all agreed? Looking good. Thank you very much indeed. Can I turn then to agenda item number 5, which is the governance and compliance report. There can be found on pages 41 to 88. And the report itself is not too long, hopefully. Over to you, I think, Jo.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. With this report today, there's been a few developments with section 4 of the report. So what I'm hoping to do, if you don't mind, is to go through every other section other than section 4, but then go to section 4 at the end, where I've got a few PowerPoint slides, which Dawn will operate for me, and I'll talk through them if that's okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so starting with section 2 of the report, good governance review. If you'll remember, we at Why Boston Makes in March, I gave a short presentation on what is proposed by the Scheme Advisory Board in terms of good governance review. That has been moving slowly during COVID, but is continuing to be worked on by the project team. What we're hoping by the end of September, and the end of September has been, and these haven't yet materialised, is that there will be some draft governance compliance statement to look at, which will be part of the new process if all the proposals go through, and a sample independent governance review report that we will have to complete should these proposals go through. They haven't appeared yet, but section 4 will explain why those haven't appeared yet. So I'll come back to that. But it's good news, it's still moving. It's not on the back burner, but it's moving at a slower rate than we initially thought due to COVID and other developments. Section 3, we've got the legislation update. If you remember the case of Walker versus Innerspec, the Supreme Court ruling there, this addressed the surviving member same-sex and female-sex inequalities in the amount of pension received for survivors. Moving on from that, we now have a different case under the name of Goodwin, and this addresses the final piece of discrimination within survivor benefits, which initially the government was going to leave as was, but now, due to the Goodwin case, they are under pressure to make sure that's addressed in the regulations. So this means that where male survivors of female scheme members will now be entitled to a lower to the same survivor benefit compared with the same sex survivor. So that should, when that's in place, address all the inequality within survivor benefits in the LGPS. That will require a piece of work for us to do, which means revisiting all the members that could have been affected by this change right back to the 5th of December 2005, and we'll need to notify them and amend their benefits accordingly. Moving on to section 3.2, there's been some LGPS amendment regulations, and this is mainly Corey's area this affects. So now in force as of the 23rd of September 2020, and Corey discussed this on his Hyman's broadcast yesterday. We can now, there's more flexibility for funds to manage risk, employer risk, in the administration of the LGPS in terms of intervaluation reviews of employer contributions, so they don't have to wait for every 3 years for that to happen now. The spreading of exit debts and deferred debt arrangements are now things that we can look at under the regulations when an employer is exiting the scheme. Corey, do you have anything to add on that one at the moment, or happy to move? Not add anything at this time?
Not at the moment, no, but I will touch on that when I talk about the funding strategy statement.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So ignoring section 4 for a moment, moving on to section, 4.3 is the McLeod section of the report. As you'll know, if you've seen your emails from yesterday, we have now formalised the response to the McLeod consultation. The deadline was yesterday and we responded yesterday. I've got a separate report covering McLeod in the next item, so I'll cover that off in more detail there. Section 5 of this report covers the LGPS National Knowledge Assessment. This was an exercise run by Hymans Robertson to assess the level of confidence and knowledge and confidence of that knowledge within pension fund committees and local pension boards across the LGPS universe. I would say we did not participate in this because it was not a free exercise, but those that did, this is the responses from that. So
I'm sure the scores would have been a lot better if we'd been participating.
Well, absolutely, of course. Yes, it goes without saying. So 225 pension committee and local pension board members have participated in the survey, and they represented 20 administering authorities. And Hymans looked at the 8 areas of the SIP for Skills and Knowledge framework, as you'll see from the table below in 5.2. And their results found that financial markets and product knowledge was the most knowledgeable and most confident area that people felt happy with. With the last the lowest rating came within actuarial method standards and practices. That may be because actually valuation only happens once every 3 years, and whereas decisions about investments are being made all the time. So this was determined through a series of questions with multiple choice answers, which hasn't always been a popular way of assessing knowledge in the past, but this is how Hyman's conducted their exercise. But this is a good indication for us when we do our training strategy as to which areas to concentrate our knowledge in. Particularly noting that pensions administration is quite low down there on the scores with 59%. This has always largely been the case. It's not the most popular area of training. It's quite complex, but then you're not really making decisions on the very detail of that every day or every meeting. So I can understand why it's quite low there, but it is equally as important. So section 6 is the skills and knowledge opportunities training events. My appendix seems to have gone missed on it. There it is, I've stapled it, the wrong bit. So that's appendix 3, page 87. And as you'll see from the list, there aren't that many things going on at the moment, but what is going on is certainly most virtual. There's no face-to-face events at all at the moment, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at that. Things are coming up at quite short notice, and so we are promoting them as and when they happen. But these are the things that we know about for the future at the moment. 2 of those events have already passed, but we will keep communicating things to you as soon as we are aware that they're happening. So, section 4. Right, I've got a presentation on this. Donna, there we go. I'm sure my colleagues Mark and Corey will help me along with this one. It's quite a large and new area.
Joe, sorry to interrupt, it's Chair. Before we delve into section 4, I think it'd be worthwhile, I just ask, does anybody have any questions on what Joe has covered so far? Because by the time we got through section 4, any questions on what we've just covered will probably be forgotten. Anybody, any questions on what Joe has covered so far, please?
Yes, I wanted to ask about the training elements of the report, if I may. I think some time ago I questioned the way training was being offered to us and the credit assessment, and I thought we were going to get a report on the issue and for discussion, but nothing seems to have happened. My concern is I keep getting invitations to join pension training events, a lot of it to do with investments, of course, but I need guidance as to what is appropriate and what is a waste of time, because there's so much of it being thrown at us. I know at the moment there's a lot because of the conference next week, but even beyond that, before that, there were loads of stuff being offered to us with no guidance. So could we have something along those lines?
Yes, yeah, we do plan on presenting a new skills and knowledge policy. We will be waiting for SIPFA to release their new strategy on that, but that hasn't happened yet. That's been delayed due to COVID. But we will be moving quickly on that because we do need to address that. We may not wait for that guidance to come through. With regards to anything we promote to you is something we think you will benefit from attending. I'm aware that once you've attended one event, sometimes your emails will be shared with investment type people who will contact you without coming through us. What I would suggest, if you ever get emails like that, you're not sure of its benefit, send it to either myself or Paul Tyso, and we can let you know whether it's of value to you or not. So they don't always come through us. So, but what we offer to you is definitely worth attending. Otherwise, we wouldn't have offered.
Richard, can I reinforce that? It's the chair again. When I get all these emails, so I just refer them to Paul and saying, is this particular one worth attending, or is it repetition, or should I bin it? And Paul always replies saying, yes, listen into that one or bin it. But that's my methodology, so to speak. Sorry, Joe, carry on.
No, I think that's all I wanted to say, other than to give some assurance that there will be a training policy arriving very shortly with the review of the credits. So it's there to do.
Thank you.
Joe,
Are you happy with that, Richard?
I will be when I get it. Yes, thank you.
That's fine. Okay, yeah.
Joe, if I may, I dislike the words "very soon." Could you be slightly more precise?
I might call Michelle in at this point. She has everything scheduled. Michelle, do you know off the top of your head when we have this scheduled?
It is on the forward agenda plan for this financial year. I'm just trying to think which way round it is with the LPB and with the committee, but certainly by the end of the year it's scheduled. To either go to the LPB first and then the committee, or the committee and the LPB, but it is on there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on what we've covered so far? Okay, section 4 then, Joe, when you're ready.
Thank you. So, right, if I may, oh, sorry, I'm working on the same presentation, but on a different computer, so bear with me. Right, so section 4 of the report covers what is titled Public Sector Exit Payment Cap and Reforming Local Government Exit Pay. So I'll start with a bit of background on where we've got to with this. So in 2015, the government announced plans to cap exit payments in the public sector so that people weren't leaving with six-figure payouts in effect. This meant at that time a 95k cap on the value of pension strain and the redundancy payment that somebody would receive. So pension strain, which is explained in a later slide, is the cost of to the employer of letting somebody go on redundancy early with their benefits paid accrue to that date with no reduction, as it would be if they'd left of their own accord. As a later point in the slide shows, this strain can be anything between several £100s up to about £300,000. So as you can imagine, with a £95,000 cap, that's going to affect the benefits that can be payable to members, particularly if a £300,000 example would be somebody that would be quite young, well, 55, with lots of service and quite a high salary. So that's been rattling around since 2015. It went quite quiet until 2019, where HM Treasury released a consultation on draft regulations, guidance and directions. That went quiet again until July 2020, when HM Treasury published their response to the consultation. Regulations have now been published, and updated guidance and directions are still to follow. So within that, so that was 5 years ago, the 95k cap was suggested, and the 95k hasn't changed in value. So that's still 95,000, and it is not index linked, and there's no plans to be index linked. So that 95 cap will be that value forever. And I believe I heard somebody say that it's now, if 95k in 2015 is now worth over 100,000 now in today's terms. So what this cap includes also is not only the pension strain, but any payment in relation to a termination of employment, which can be statutory redundancy, severance payments, pension strain, as I've already said. With this, there are some relaxations and waivers available, which would have to go through full council and sometimes Treasury to be signed off. So the relaxations and waivers are not looking to be used too often. So that was all fine. We were happy with, well, relatively happy with that. We knew what was happening. But on 7th of September 2020, MHCLG released their own consultation about reforming local government exit pay, only affecting the Lgps. And this is where things took a sudden change from what was quite simple to something quite complex. So, yep, the next slide. So MHCLG have proposed some changes to redundancy packages. As per the slide, redundancy packages should now be a maximum of 3 weeks pay per year of service, a maximum of 15 months of pay on the amount of redundancy payment, a maximum salary of 80,000 on which an exit cap can be based. Previously that was unlimited, so if your salary was 100,000, that's what it would be based on. And again, the 95k cap to include all forms of compensation, redundancy payments, pension strain, compromise agreements, and special severance payments. And again, beneath that, there's the explanation of pension strain, which I've already gone through. So on slide 4, how does this affect the LGPS is the big question. So as of today, adopted today, members who have the LGPS who are made redundant from their employment at age 55 are currently entitled to immediate payment of LGPS benefits that are unreduced, no matter the size of the strain cost. So if their pension strain was 300,000, they were walking away with that package and unreduced pension benefits. Statutory redundancy pay, they're entitled to that, and any discretionary compensation that would be awarded by the employer based on the compensation regulations. So that's as it is today and as it's up to today. The new proposals within the consultation are that employees aged 55 plus will not be able to receive both an unreduced pension and a redundancy payment. To receive an unreduced pension, like they would today, the member must make a payment towards the pension strain equal to their statutory redundancy pay, effectively giving up their statutory redundancy pay entitlement. However, if a pension is being made immediately and not fully reduced, because now under the new proposal, the members have choice about what to do. Previously, they had to take their pension at age 55 or whenever they were made redundant. Now they're building in a bit of choice. But the consequence of that is if a pension is being paid immediately and not fully reduced, as you'll see from the slides that are about to follow, then the employer may not make payment of discretionary compensation. So that's all fairly complex, and the worrying issue is here, this is likely to come into effect by the end of October.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the reaction we had. And as you can imagine, this will impact those who are going through the processes of redundancy now. They've already had an expectation of what they might receive, may have made decisions about their future based on it, although in the redundancy case, there may not be a lot of choice. But there is a big impact around if somebody now is made redundant in the mid-November, they may be affected by all of this. So if I move on to some examples which are based on GAD guidance that was released at the beginning of last week, which we've been trawling through, and in some places a bit at odds with the consultation response. So you have to bear with us here. This is our interpretation based on what we've read and what we understand. This is not to be sort of shared any wider or quoted on as or taken as gospel. This is purely as our understanding is, pending further guidance on some of the issues. So if I may start with an example here. So with all cases going forward, when these regulations are in place, the first thing we have to look at when somebody is made redundant is the value of their pension strain. Now, GAD have come up with some new factors that we all use across the LGPS universe. Previously, pension strain was based on individual factors for each pension fund, based on the situation within each scheme and the unique side of that would be normally calculated by the actuary. But now pension strain on the grounds of redundancy will be calculated by GAD and to make it fair across all LGPS funds. So what we have here, the first example, is a member whose pension strain does not exceed 95k. So that's the starting point. So this example here, member is 56, the salary is 57,000, the pension strain is 84,765 pounds. The redundancy pay, 9,684, discretionary redundancy pay, which is the extra bit on top, which can vary between employers, is 19,912 pounds. So the member has 4 options now. The first is immediate unreduced pension benefits, which is what people would normally receive now. As you can see from the example here, so they will no longer get the statutory redundancy pay because that is going towards the pension strain. There's no entitlement to discretionary part of the redundancy pay because the employer is not allowed to award this when the member is receiving fully unreduced benefits. And the bit below that, what I've put here is what the current value of the package is to the member. So they would be walking away with a package of benefits, not excluding their pension and lump sum, not including that, of 114,000. Under the new regime, their package to the member will be £84,765. So that's the effect the cap has had on that package of benefits, which the member would have normally received had none of this happened. And then further down the slides, we've got the situation where a member it receives immediate partially reduced benefits and payment of their statutory redundancy pay, and then immediate reduced pension benefits and payment of both statutory and discretionary redundancy pay, and where members elect to don't take their pension immediately, but instead take payment of their statutory redundancy pay and discretionary redundancy pay. And as you'll see across the slides, the value of the package to the member changes in regards to their option. Of course, the value of the package to the member is actually what it costs the employer to make this person redundant. Without getting into too much detail about all these slides and all these examples, I've got 2 more slides of examples, which I'll run through really briefly. We've got a member here who does breach the 95k cap on pension strain. In this example, the member can take immediate unreduced or partially reduced benefits by making a cash payment up from their own money, so not from any benefits that are being awarded from the employer or from the scheme, to bring that pension up to an unreduced amount. They can do that they can partially do that, so they can pay £1 being flippant, or they could pay up to 7,611 as per this example. And as you can see here from the bottom of this slide, the current value of package to member would have been 138,000. Of course, now members can only receive benefits up to 95k. The new value of the package to member is £95,000. Then you have the immediate reduced pension example, where a member takes away their statutory and their discretionary redundancy pay, and the effect that's had is quite drastic on the cost of that package of benefits. And again, the deferred option, where the member leaves their pension in the scheme and takes it at normal retirement age, normal pension age. Again, quite a significant loss to the member of what they would have normally walked away with. So, sorry, this is getting incredibly technical, so bear with me. Now, example member C on the next slide, which Dawn has already moved to, thank you. This is where we're a little bit less clear on what the benefits, on how these options actually play out, and we need further guidance, hence the disclaimer at the top there. So this is where a member does not breach the 95k cap and pension strain is less than the discretionary redundancy pay. Now, we don't expect this to happen too often in reality, because this is normally where people are at the end of or approaching retirement age. So their pension strain is less, but we don't tend to see, hopefully won't see many of these cases. But in this example, you've got a 64-year-old scheme member with a small salary, or a modest salary of £35,000, pension strain of 9,933, representing how close it is to normal pension age. The statutory redundancy pay, that's just slightly less than the pension strain, but the discretionary pay is redundancy pay is 8,489. So if the member wanted to receive immediate unreduced pension benefits, they would also get a cash top-up of 8,240. In this instance, there's no entitlement to receive the statutory redundancy pay, as this is going towards the pension strain. There's no entitlement to the discretionary redundancy pay, as a member is not allowed to award this because the member is receiving fully unreduced benefits. However, strain minus the statutory redundancy pay is less than the discretionary redundancy pay, so they can have the balance of that as payment to them. And there's the equivalent examples as you go down the screen. And like I say, we're less clear about this arrangement than the other 2 examples, but this is what we're negotiating, or what we're dealing with at the moment, and trying to understand how this will impact us, particularly as we might be sort of actioning this within the next 20 days or so, and where we haven't had the LGPS regulations mended to be able to make these payments. So we understand now that the Scheme Advisory Board have raised a legal challenge or asked a question of legal advisors as to whether funds should be paying the benefits out on this basis without the LGPS regulations being in place, and we wait to hear what that will be. So in a nutshell, sorry, that was quite complex. Any questions?
Well, there's a deathly hush in the close tonight, 10 to make and the match to win. Any questions from any of the members, please?
Yes, Chairman. Sorry, I can't seem to raise my hand. I do apologise.
No, unfortunately, when you've got sharing, it doesn't work. Unfortunately, I found that problem the other day. Do we need any more of the slides? That's better. We can go back to that. Thank you then. Ian, yes, please go ahead.
So I'm just trying to gather my thoughts again now. With regard to the scheme then, just go to somebody else a minute, Terry, just while I read.
Can I ask a question and I lead off? It struck me when I looked at slide 3 that the lesser you get from the pension, the worse you are off, because in percentage-wise, if you're higher up the scale, the amount you lose is significantly less than when you're lower down the scale. Is that fair?
When you say slide 3, do you mean example 3?
Example 3, yes. I apologise for
Yeah.
that. Example 1 and 2. When you're looking, he's losing 10 on a 28, he's down to 18. I can't remember the figures exactly, but that's nearly 40% of a loss. When you look at the higher figures, you're looking at 95 compared to 120 something or other. That's not 40%. That struck me as being very, very unfair. I don't know who's worked these figures out, but you know, we're hitting the poor rather than hitting those that are not, well, we're getting more, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the interesting things that's come out of this, that we all thought the 95k cap would address those that were high earners. But in reality, when you start building in redundancy pay and both statutory and discretionary into this, it has more of an impact on those on a more modest salary.
This is wrong, and I feel we should challenge it.
Yeah, Scheme Advisory Board are recommending that funds suggest that statutory redundancy pay is left out of the equation with regards to this. That's fair to say, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's a number of things going on though. In truth, I think that's right. I guess there's no doubt if you are a really high earner, there's a cliff edge here where your benefits package is going to be hugely reduced from what it was before. You know, if your strain cost is a couple of £100,000, and we do have you do get senior leaders where it is, you know, the strain cost alone is half, plus you know, even set ignoring all the other benefits. But I don't think that's really the point, because obviously there aren't that many affected in that way. I think the harder thing is where people are going to have a really difficult choice between taking the cash, which is a redundancy payment, whether it's statutory or discretionary, versus can they actually afford to give up a big chunk of that and have a slightly bigger pension. I think that's sometimes the difficult balance for lower earners. They may need the cash from those both parts of the redundancy payment, because I think one thing we have noticed, the way a significant cash lump sum because significant strain cost translates into additional pension, it's you need a lot of cash to increase your pension significantly. So people, I think, will be steering towards taking their redundancy pay and actually giving up a valuable pension benefit by doing so.
Are you saying then that you're allowed to amortize your pension by taking a more lump sum, or?
No, well, what I'm saying is, if you can imagine, if you want anything other than a completely reduced pension, so if you want a partially, if you want an unreduced or a a partially reduced pension, you need to give up your discretionary redundancy payment. And people may not be able to do that because they need that as an ongoing income, because the pension alone won't be enough. So I think that's the problem. So I think we looked at one the other day where the strain cost you, it's almost like it's factoring about you can live for 22 years in terms of the multiple the pension versus the strain cost represents.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
I've got two other questions. Ian, have you gathered your thoughts together?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Joe, you mentioned about the if the scheme goes ahead and we're looking to be paying it from, say, the beginning of November, do you think we are liable to get legal challenges to us with regard to that?
Yeah, it is incredibly difficult because in one sense, I think there's a bit of a question over which legislation overrides which piece of legislation. So I think that's being investigated as well with regards to the legal challenge by SAB. Yeah, because as it stands, the Lgps regulations don't allow us to pay anything but option one within these options. So an immediate and reduced pension benefit. Right. We're technically currently not allowed to defer someone's benefits. Not only do we have that issue, we also have how on earth are we going to make this work with our scheme employers? I mean, I should also say this at the moment is only affecting local authority employers. So whilst we've got several hundred employers in the scheme, this is most likely at the moment to be affecting local authorities, so districts, boroughs, parishes, I believe. So it won't be every employer, but what we do have is significant challenges in communicating this with employers and communicating this to scheme members. Because not only do they have these options, but they also have options, commutation options within these options as well. So we feel that members will want to understand or receive advice on what option to take. And of course, we can't give them financial advice, nor will the scheme employer be able to give them financial advice, but we're in a very grey area at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joe. That's very cool. So that means then really you've got to provide each member with a financial advice with regard to each option they could possibly have, as I understand it, and then they would need to go away and see a financial advisor as to which one would be more suitable for that particular member in their circumstances. Am I correct in thinking that? Or
yeah, well, we certainly couldn't give any advice. We could give them the options, but like I say, within the options there are further options, like standard options that we would offer regardless anyway within the remit of the scheme rules, but in terms of sacrificing pension to take more lump sum. So yeah, it's going to be really complex, and whereas before we might have just given two estimates, so here's your benefits that they would be payable, you can choose to commute your pension to lump sum. Now we'll be giving them 4 or 3 and the deferred option, and then the options within that. We've also got issues with the pension strain in terms of its statutory redundancy pay, which by the word statutory means the member is entitled to it. And we've got issues over whether the employer will pay the money, the statutory redundancy pay, to the scheme member, who then has to pay it back to us so that they can receive immediate unreduced pension benefits. It's all adding time and bureaucracy into an already quite tricky process. And obviously each employer works differently. So yeah, it's a bit of a minefield. And like I say, it could be in 3 weeks' time. So it's become the biggest issue within the Lgps at the moment. The cloud has sort of looks easy now compared to this.
Yes.
Joe. Councillor Shellings, Mike.
You're on mute, sorry, Mike.
You're muted, Mike.
First of all, I hope I'm right in saying that there's no test after school on this.
No.
Because I found that absolutely mind-boggling. Secondly, the one note of clarity that I picked up from the beginning of your short talk was that you considered somebody of 55 to be young, and I approve of that. Thirdly, I would find it interesting if someone were to suggest that this should be applied to the city as well, because I could imagine screams of anguish and pain, and it would not happen. But fourthly, as a more serious point, what is the effect on our cash flow? Is it going to make any difference to the future of our assets?
No, I think it's cost neutral. That'd be right, wouldn't it?
Mark?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't thought of it. I mean, the strain cost, which is what a lot of this is about, is effectively just the cost of the early payment. In that sense, we're still going to be just paying out benefits and getting an amount of money appropriate for the amount we're paying out. So I think it's cost neutral, as Joe says. Just trying to think it through on the hoof. But yeah, I mean that's reality. What we pay out is going to be. But I guess it may be that the amounts going out and the amounts coming in are less, if that makes sense, because people are taking perhaps reduced benefits and there's less strain costs coming in, but it still means it's neutral.
Mark, if I could comment on there
Go
as
for
well.
that, yeah.
The one thing I would add to that is that the government is going to be setting the strain costs that need to be used for calculating the 95k cap, which might be different to our local strain costs. So there could be some differences there, but we would pick any differences up through the valuation process, and ultimately the contributions the employers would need to pay would be impacted if there is any shortfall there. So
Mark, could I come in here? Could we have a consolidated reply once we get a little bit more information and let all members know, and send out an email? Would that be useful, Mike? The next question is...
Yes, Chairman. Sorry,
thanks.
I was muted.
That's all right, Mike. Thank you. The next question comes from Richard, please. Councillor Robinson.
Yes, thank you. I was a bit confused. It says...
Just a bit, Richard.
4.2.8, it says that the closing date for the consultation is the 9th of November. And we're invited to respond by then. But we've already responded, and you're talking about it being implemented at the end of October. So is that not correct?
Yeah, the initial MHCLG closing date was the 9th of November, but I think there has been a bit of a disconnect between that and the reality of it coming forward. Not only that, I think people were hoping that the amendments, the Lgps regulations, would be running along this same timeline. Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's right. I think the Lgps consultations will be still running before, whilst it could be live in effect by as a result of the overriding legislation.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think the points made by you about the unfairness of the result for lower paid people surely cannot have been intended. And have we actually? I can't see that we've actually. Have we commented on that in particular, or have we still got the ability to do so?
We haven't responded to this consultation yet.
Right.
So there is time to do that.
So the list of respondents, which includes us, is not relevant.
Oh, are you referring to the first consultation, which is
probably?
Yes, yeah, we responded to that one. That was the one earlier on. So the second appendix, entitled Reforming Local Government Exit Pay, consultation, that one's got the 9th of November.
Yeah,
so this was the government's response, was the first one. So yeah, we have still got time to respond to that.
All right. Well, I certainly think we should follow the point made by our chair that it doesn't sound fair. Are there any other particular areas that we need to respond on, as suggested?
I think the issue about statutory redundancy pay, leaving that out of the equation, should be included too. And that's certainly been recommended by the Scheme Advisory Board that funds should raise that as an issue.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. John, you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman. As an elected membership representative, I accept this is all very new, but how and when are these major changes likely to be released to our members who are actually sitting there having to decide what line to take?
We have communicated with all scheme employers with regards to these changes. I made it clear that some employers may be affected by this, some not. This is particularly relevant in the Northamptonshire space at the moment with the unitary process, where we have been dealing with a large number of inquiries with regards to redundancy. We are putting out big disclaimers. We're only currently, if I'm right in saying, I think it's changed in the last few days, is we are providing retirement estimates on the grounds of redundancy up to the end of October as a redundancy date. That's right, isn't it? Thank you, Corey. Yeah, and then we are putting on hold anything after that date. So those who have been issued redundancy estimates before these changes were announced, we'll say with a retirement date of 31st December, we need to think about those in terms of how we communicate those changes. But we need to know from the employers who's definitely retiring, because we don't normally deal with members directly on the grounds of redundancy. There's always an employer involved.
In answer to that, Chair, thank you. I appreciate that it's going to affect employers in a great way. But my main concern is how are we going to, if anything, notify these major changes to our members?
Sorry, anytime there's a material change to the scheme, there is a process of communicating that, which Corey's just taken off his mic, and I'm sure he's going to come in now. So that's but that's always after the change has taken place, once we definitively know what the change is. The problem here is the interplay between and sorry, I should also stress, of course, that a huge part of these changes are not specifically pension changes. They're obviously local government exit pay, which is, and i.e. not pension. So that makes it even more confusing than normal. But Corey, do you want to come in on what the timeline is we have for any material change to the scheme?
Yeah, so just back up what Mark says there. The difficulty is not knowing exactly what the change is going to be at the moment. We normally have 2 months after any change is brought in order to inform members of those changes. But what I'd say in this particular case, because it is redundancy cases, there is heavy HR involvement in those processes. They have to discuss that with the employee. So our focus has been on communicating that to employers at this moment, so they can have those discussions with anybody where there's a live case at the moment. They can warn them that these changes are coming up and potential implications. But as Mark said, until we know what the changes are going to be to the regulations, we can't say anything to members with certainty.
I'm also sorry, John.
Sorry, did I mishear Joe in saying the changes are coming into effect at the end of October?
There's 2 levels of changes is the problem. So there's the Treasury change, which is the 95k cap. In addition to that, and separately, is the MHCLG reform changes. And it's those that are being consulted on at the moment that are not yet in place. And it's the interaction between them that causes the particular issues for members.
Yeah, if I could just come in, just to put it really simply, the changes for the overall changes to public sector have been, and for local government, should I say, have been read in the House of Commons or House of Lords. They're basically sitting on the minister's desk at the moment to be signed. Once they're signed, they could come in as early as 21 days later. The problem is we need guidance. If they do come in before the local government regulations have changed, we'll need guidance from LGA as to how to effectively operate the scheme regarding this at that point, for that interim period until our regulations are updated. So that's why it'd be very difficult for us to say precisely how we would administer it, which is why we're, as Corey says, whilst we will obviously communicate formally to changes in the required timeline, the concentration is individual cases at scheme employers, making sure that they're aware of what the potential impacts are. But we're talking in potential terms. We can't say definitively because, you know, things like, for example, are there going to be any waivers allowed over an interim period? You know, is perhaps not. Are any cases where numbers have already been discussed and exits agreed? Are they going to be honoured? It's those sorts of things that we don't know.
John, does that answer your question?
In part, Chairman, thank you. I'm still a bit concerned that all of these major changes are going on, and the ordinary member who maybe doesn't have a great deal of knowledge about pensions has got a lot to consider when they decide they're going to either go for early retirement or redundancy or whatever. It seems to me we've got a responsibility to keep our members notified of the changes.
I agree with you there, but on the other hand, John, if I may come in here, it's better that they know what the actual changes are rather than the maybes leading up to the actual changes, if you understand what I'm getting at. I think what we're waiting for is guidance on this from the various powers that be that sit above us. And I think it might be wrong to push out information that might, put it bluntly, be dud, rather than actual factual information that has been agreed by all parties.
I agree, but
Yeah.
what concerned me was the mention of implementation coming very shortly.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry, Joe, go on.
Sorry. I was just going to say that this shouldn't just be seen as a pensions issue. This is equally an employer's issue as well. They are the ones making the decision about redundancy and termination of employment.
Yes.
We, in the old days, would have just, processed the redundancy payment, the redundancy pension regardless. So sorry.
Sorry, Mike's left his mic on and has wanted to talk to somebody. I do apologise.
I can't mute him. So, yeah, I mean, we are working closely with HR departments. This is on them to communicate as much as it is on us. As Mark spoke about the waivers and exemptions and things, that would be for the employer to apply for going through full council and then going to ministers for ultimate decisions. So we are working closely with HR departments over this, and it is, I think, first of all, it's equally down to the employer as well.
Thank you, Joe.
Chairman, if I could just add a point on there just to reassure committee members as well. If you take the 95k cap part of it in isolation, if we get an announcement from Treasury that has been signed and will come into order at some point, then we would communicate that to members. So there's potentially a two-stage part to this. The difficulty is in that interaction between the two regulations and the gap in between. But as soon as that 95k cap change comes in, we would inform members that was live.
Thank you, Corey. Lee, final question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to check if I'd understood correctly that the cap will only apply to local government exit payments. So if it's an employer that's not local authority, then the cap wouldn't apply. Is that correct?
The presentation that I delivered on the slides, this is purely LGPS at the moment. But there's a form of words that has been said. I'll try and find them. But at the current time, these restrictions are just for local government. Bear with me 1 second.
Watch this space.
Yeah, LGA, there's a quote here, I'll read it as it is. LGA also advised that LGPS employers other than local authorities could be in scope of the cap, wider reform, both or neither. So, yeah, what we're sure about now is this affects local authorities. There could be a wider scope, or there could not be. So it's a bit of a minefield.
So to be fair, it's called reforming local government exit pay. So generally, you'd expect it to that, but you're right to point that out, Jay.
Joe, am I correct? The exit cap part of it, though, the 95k cap, is slightly wider in its public sector employers as well. So that is not just local authorities for that part of it. and the likelihood of that part applying to admission bodies is probably quite low. And there is a definition of employers around for that one that's been released by the Treasury. So that, again, there are different employers that will be affected differently by the combination of the reforms.
Yeah, and that was the sort of gist of my question. So I think somebody else referred to the fact that you know, HR departments will be heavily involved because of the redundancy processes. Obviously, to the extent to which there's a HR department depends very much on the size of the employer. And you know, particularly some of the smaller employers. And the other thought that occurs to me is where staff have tupied from a local authority into another employer that's an admitted body, what the impact would be on them. I mean, just looking at the local authority part seems complex enough without adding on the complexity of the admitted bodies. I think any advice that could be sent out to the other employers, in particular the smaller ones, to try and help them navigate the way through this, and you know, what may be certain at the moment and what's uncertain would be really helpful for those employers, I would suggest.
Yeah. Thank you, Lee. Well, no other questions. We are asked to note the contents of the report. Obviously, a couple of things have arisen. I think the officers have got the feeling of the members, especially as regards fairness and whether or not what's applicable and what might be applicable come the end of this month. Also, the question of cash flow, Mark, I think if you could, when you have consolidated your thoughts and obviously consulted with the other officers, and let members know through email what the effect of cash flow on the fund might be or might not be as regards this particular issue. Anybody, any points to raise? Anything I've forgotten to raise?
Just one thing, Chairman. I think one might wish to add a rider to our recommendations to wish Joe the best of luck in working our way through this.
Yes. I've written something down here. I said, once again, the Whitehall Mandarins have left us with a bag of spaghetti, and it's up for us to sort it out. With that stated, are we all in favour of the report? Well, we're not all in favour, but are we agreed with the report? Right, thank you. I'm sorry that's taken a bit of time. Let's now go, and my other screen's just gone blank on me. Thank you very much. But it's agenda item now number 6, I think. And Joe, I've got you down to present this one as well.
Yes, thank you. I'll make this one as easy as I can. In fact, this report is effectively on McLeod and age discrimination in the Lgps. So you'll all have been on the McLeod journey that's been going on for a number of years now. We've reached the point in the process where MHCLG published a consultation on the proposed remedies to address the age discrimination because of McLeod in the Lgps regulations. Section 2.2 of the report goes through a number of the technical requirements to get rid of all the age discrimination. I won't go through them. I don't think the emphasis of this report is really on the practical issues around McLeod, but they're there in 2.2 should you wish to talk about them any further at any point. What this report does cover is the potential impact on the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund, which is what we're interested in. So what we have done earlier in the year, I think, around about June, we asked Aon, our benefits and governance consultants, to undertake an analysis of the impact of McLeod on our scheme members. Now, this was before the consultation was released, so these figures may change slightly. So in the table in 3.2 on page 91 shows that 24% of the scheme membership is likely to be affected in some way by McLeod. And I should point out at this point, that doesn't mean that 24% of the scheme membership is going to get a nice big windfall. It means 24% of the scheme membership need looking at to see what extent their benefits need to be remedied in line with the proposals in the consultation. Some members could be £1 better off. Some members could be several £100s better off. So what the point I'm trying to make here is that there's a lot of work to be done, but the actual payouts to scheme members and rectification may be small in terms of the value of money in comparison. So table 3.3 gives a bit of some information on which scheme employers are most likely to be affected or have members that would be affected by the remedy. Not surprisingly, Cambridgeshire County Council is one of the biggest employers anyway, so that's got the most members there. Peterborough City, and then Cambridgeshire Chief Constable, which is the police. And then we have 250 other employers where 12,500 members are likely to be affected. The reason about tackling or addressing this in terms of employers is we need to go back and ask employers to be sure that they've given us every single hour change that the scheme member has had since 2012 going up to 31st of March 2022. Because of this care scheme that came in on the 1st of April 2014, we haven't actually needed to restore part-time hours, although we have been. We're one of the lucky funds that decided to keep doing that. Other funds we know have not recorded hour changes from the 1st of April 2014. So they've got a lot more work to do than us, but we need to be sure that to make sure the underpin works properly, that every employer has told us about every change of hours that a scheme member has had during that 10-year period. So that's quite a significant piece of work that Corey's team will be working on. That needs to be in place by 31st of March 22, sorry. So that when the remedy comes into effect, the records are all right and we can start working on them. So that will be a significant piece of work. And as you have seen from our consultation response, which I emailed, or Michelle emailed yesterday, we've got great concern over employers not being able to give this information because they don't have a duty to store it past 7 years. We have employers that are no longer in the scheme, employers that have moved payroll providers. So there is quite a challenge in confirming that data. We haven't got as big a challenge as not having kept it at all, but there's still a challenge to make sure our data is as right as it can be. So that's all covered off in the consultation response, because we will want guidance from MHCLG or Scheme Advisory Board as to how to deal with employers that are not cooperating, because ultimately the costs will fall on them if we're having to make decisions about what their data should be for their scheme members. So what I've done in Appendix 1 is highlighted a number of issues that we need to address or should be given, and this was included in the consultation response to MHCLG, is all the issues we think we're going to have to implement the remedy when the time comes. And those issues cover governance and the sort of the extra governance we need around managing this significant project. Will we need a project group, that kind of thing. Obviously the ongoing reporting to yourselves, the data collection, which I've just talked about, communicating with members and getting employers on board, staff training. And again, that depends on how well our software system can cope with this, how much manual intervention will be required. And then over the page, we were talking about administration system requirements. Will the software be updated in time when we need to start this work? As you'll see from the consultation response, we've asked MHCLG and Scheme Advisory Board to advise of timelines as to which members we should deal with first, which types of members, i.e. retired, pensioners, deceased members, who will all be affected. Will the software be able to do bulk adjustments? If we're having to do 24,000 members individually, that will take longer than doing 24,000 members in bulk. How will we communicate the changes to members? We've got issues with the annual benefit statements, how we record the underpin on that. There's quite a section on that covered within our consultation response, because members' benefits are now going to look quite complicated, and we want to make sure that members are still able to engage and use an annual benefit statement and that it's still meaningful. So there's some issues about presentation of the revised underpin on that. Going back to the table, there's ongoing administration issues in terms of how long we're going to have to deal with McLeod. It could be that we're dealing with this for a long period of time, not just for the work starting in 2022. It could be featuring our administration for forever. So will have an ongoing impact. Then we have some particularly technical areas where we're concerned about McLeod and the impact on sort of staffing is with annual allowance, which is the amount a member can save each year without incurring a tax charge. Lifetime allowance, how much they're able to save over the period of their retirement, of their membership. Pension sharing on divorce. If we're having to rectify members' benefits who have already shared some of their pension through divorce proceedings, that's going to be quite tricky and complicated to sort out. And also transfers out when members have transferred their benefits out to another scheme. We're going to have to address those as well. So there's lots of issues with this, which we're seeking guidance on through the consultation. This is, now I'm talking about it now, it is a considerable project that will take up a lot of resource. It just doesn't feel as soon as and under pressure as the exit payment stuff, but this is still another big project that will start to come to us, start feeding into our resources very soon. So where else are in the report? The other item in the report is the cost control mechanism. This was something that was put in place when a new scheme was introduced and features in the Public Service Pensions Act 2013. It's a mechanism to keep the cost of the scheme to a particular percentage of 19.5% of pensionable pay. Previously, back in 2000 and what year was it now? 16, the cost of the scheme has fallen below the cost that it should be. It's fallen less than 2%, more than 2% below what it should be. So the scheme needs to be redesigned to bring it up to that cost. What happened was McLeod happened, and then nobody was particularly sure of what the impact of McLeod would have been, would prove to be. So it was hard to know what benefits to improve within the scheme. So that was put on hold for several years. Now that the McLeod consultation has been released with the underpin and knowing how that's going to work, the cost control mechanism is back in place. So effectively that could mean that we have more scheme changes again as a result of the scheme being not the right cost that we will have to implement and backdate also. So there's lots of fallout from McLeod and all happening at roughly the same time. So lots going on is how I'd sum that up. So I think I'll leave it at that and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions, please, from members? Thank you very much. I know we've been covering this for some months or years now. It seems to have been going on. It's ongoing there. Hopefully we've now reached the end as regards the court and legal side of the matter. Obviously what has been left with us is a very large administration requirement. Mark, how is all this work going to affect our officers, please?
Well, I guess at the moment I'm seeing it as the current year is data collection. Next year is updating the data with anything that employers haven't provided us with, but that we have said in the report that we have been collecting the majority of this data already. So I think it's about what the technological solutions are to enable us to do that update. But then the real pain, I guess, hits home the year after more than anything. So I think then we would, if we don't need any additional resource, I would be amazed at that point. It's possible that next year we will as well. The only one thing I was just going to comment on was that the table in section 3 of the report, the numbers subject to the remedy. Of course, individuals can be subject to the remedy, but when you look at the compare current benefits to the benefits with the additional protections, they're still better off as they are now. So you know, an increase might be zero. Joe said it could be £1 to whatever. You know, when you look at them, a lot of the time now, those additional protections don't mean we pay more pension because they're better off under the new scheme than they are the old. So we just don't know how many of those thousands of people will be better off or worse off under the respective schemes. But yes, you're right to flag the resource issue.
Thank you, Mark. Mike, Councillor Shellings.
Yes, I was going to raise the resource issue as well, and wonder how that. I mean, we've had rainforests full of paper and anxiety on this since I can hardly remember, and it's just a huge industry. And I just wonder how much the average or a typical or a whatever, because this is an impossible question, payment might change to someone's to one of these 24% might be, to give me an indication. Are we talking about tuppence or are we talking about £10,000?
I doubt you'll be talking about £10,000. You'll be talking about very. I mean, Joe. I mean, it's fair to say, isn't it? Under the current remedy, hardly any people actually have an uplift as a result of the protection.
Yeah, because pay has stagnated. Yeah.
As you say, the reason for that is because of sort of the way local authority, in particular, salaries have increased relative to inflation over time. Now that may change, although I guess if there's austerity down the line, it won't. But the protections are bringing in some additional protection which weren't there, particularly the two-stage approach that's mentioned in the report, where you look at sort of like the reductions that apply on the specific date the individuals leave, actually leaving and taking their benefits, or sorry, taking their benefits, should I say. So more people might come into scope as a result of that. But the value, these are low values, these uplifts usually.
So, I mean, it strikes me, Chairman, that we've got a huge amount of very expensive administrative work to do, and I'm thinking at least 5 noughts and possibly 6 if it all went pear-shaped. And basically, everybody's going to end up where they were before we started. It seems to me a fatuous exercise. But can I move on and sorry, just respond to that, Chairman, if you would.
No, I think when you look at the work associated with this particular agenda item, then compare it with the last agenda item and perhaps add the two together, the workload on our officers is going to increase incrementally, and I'm very concerned about that.
Yes.
I mean, they're very hardworking, and I'm not being that there, but I'm very pleased and admire the work that they do, but certainly it's going to hit us hard in that particular aspect. But of course, they are legal challenges, and we have now to comply to what the court has said we must do. Sorry, Mike, carry on.
Yes, and what happens if I've thrown away all my employee records, or if I've ceased trading and I've gone bust and so on? What happens?
That's what we're seeking guidance on. Initially, we're thinking we may have to make assumptions. Because of it's now a care scheme, and this period is covering a large part of the care scheme, it's now impossible to work out what somebody's hours were. When it was just a final salary scheme, we could actually work it out. We didn't know how to. But now with this care scheme, it includes all sorts of different elements of pay, so it's impossible to work back. So we are asking MHCLG and SAB for guidance on that, because we could make a judgment that might not be right, might affect the member adversely, or they might not benefit from it as much. So yeah, it's one of the valid questions that we've asked for guidance on.
Yeah, because I can envisage that in the employment situation that we're facing, non-existing employers could be an increasing problem.
Yeah, I guess about 3.6 of the report does just emphasise that we did continue to collect all the information we used to collect around our changes. So it's only those employers who have forgotten to tell us about a change. No, they may be the very ones that no longer exist, it's fair to say, but compared to funds who just turned off that tap of information, we have, in theory, continued to collect it all.
Thank you. Terry,
Sorry,
you're
Chairman.
muted.
I know, I've just found out, I just read it. No other recommendations. I'd like to turn to the recommendation. Sorry, no other questions. I'd like to turn to recommendation. Note the contents of the report. Are we all agreed? Right, thank you very much. Turn now to agenda item number 7, which can be found on pages 97 to 102 of your papers. Corey, I think you're leading on this one.
I am. Thank you, Chairman. This report is seeking approval of changes to the funding strategy statement and some corresponding changes to our discretions policy as well, following the introduction of new legislation. You might remember back in June, I discussed with you that new regulations they brought in place around the exit payments that are paid to employers that leave the fund with a surplus in their funding position. Legislation was originally brought in 2018, but it was a very blunt instrument, and it just simply said if there is a surplus, it has to be paid out. It didn't allow for any mitigating factors such as risk sharing arrangements between admitted bodies and the scheme employers. So the issues were raised with the government. They made some changes and they introduced new legislation that was backdated to the original change of that legislation, giving funds discretion over the determination of whether an exit payment should be paid, and if it should, what the value of that exit payment is, allowing us to take into account a number of factors, such as whether the surplus is mainly due to market conditions rather than any contributions that the employer has made, whether those risk sharing procedures or agreements are in place between the scheme employer and the admitted body, where the risk would flow back to the local authority, and so should the surplus as such, and various other things that we can take into account as well. So we updated the funding strategy statement in consultation with our actuarial advisors, and we have introduced an exit payment policy, an exit credit policy that sets out the process that we'll go through and the considerations that we'll make when exercising that discretion. It's only one section of the funding strategy statement that's been updated, so we've included the full excerpt of that addition into the report for you to read. There are no other changes to the rest of the funding strategy statement, and we did issue that for consultation with employers as well, but received no responses to that consultation. So we're asking you to approve that change that you can see at section 2.3 of the report. On the back of that, in section 3, we've also made an update to the discretions document, setting out that discretion that the fund has, and seeking to have delegated authority to the head of pensions and the section 151 officer in making that decision. Again, the changes are included in the report for you to read. Other than that, I don't have anything else to add to the report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Corey. Richard, I think you have a question, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. Yes. Can I just clarify the wording of the proposed amendment? Is that a standard one Lgps are applying everywhere, or is it one we've had to produce ourselves? And the other question is the corollary of this, where there is a shortfall, there is no question about recovering it. Presumably it's just automatic that we require it. Is that correct?
That's correct. So if there was a shortfall, that's already covered within the regulations and within the policies that we have, how we would deal with that, and particularly if that risk sharing is in place as well. In terms of this change, the wording is unique to our fund and our relationship with the actuarial advisor, because you take into account your local policy. There are different ways that people could apply these regulations. So I expect most funds with the same advisor to have similar wording, but different funds with different actuarial advisors and different legal advisors might have different wording. So it's been a combination of advice from those two people.
Okay, that's okay on that one. The second point I asked was, is the corollary the same? Are you saying that it's not automatic that we always expect recovery of a shortfall?
The default is to expect recovery of the shortfall where the risk has sat with that exiting employer. But if there's been an agreement where another body holds that pension risk, then an exit payment may not be payable. As you'll see when we move to the admissions and cessations document, we've got some examples there. So in that case, another body takes on those liabilities and we pull them together with their current liabilities.
Yeah, yes, yes, of course that would happen. We would expect that, that's right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I haven't any other questions. Does anybody else like to come in or not? If not, I'll turn to the recommendation. The recommendation is slightly different this time, that the committee approve the amendments to the funding strategy statement, and the pension committee approve the updating of the administration or administrating authority discretions document to reflect the new policy. Are we all in favour? Don't see any objections. The recommendation is carried. Thank you very much indeed. Corey, I think you're leading on the next agenda item. That's the Cambridge Pensions Fund Communication Strategy, which can be found on pages 103 to 126. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you again, Chairman. This is a report that should originally be being brought to the committee in March, but given the last minute changes that we had regarding the pandemic and the shutdown, we put that back on the agenda so we could focus on some more important items. This is regarding an update to the communication strategy. They're very minor updates in the whole, just updating the wording to make sure that the document remains current. And we have also slotted into the main communication strategy the contents of the digital communication strategy, which the committee had previously approved as well. The new strategy is included as an appendix to the report, and the changes are summarised in the table at section 2.3, the committee member to see. Other than that, the report does give an update on the communication activities that we've undertaken so far in the year. Because you would normally have seen this at the beginning of the year, I wanted to make sure that you had a picture of this is the strategy we put in place, this is the communication plan, and these are the things that have already been achieved from that plan. So that's there for you to review as well. The recommendation is that the committee approves the communication strategy. I haven't got anything else to add to the report, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Corey. Again, no indication of any questions. If that's the case, I'd like to turn to the recommendation, and that is the committee approves the communication strategy. Are we all in agreement? Everybody's nodding. Thank you very much. That's therefore agreed. Next agenda item is agenda item number 9, which can be found on page 127. I think, Ben, you're leading on this, but prior to me handing over to you, I'd like to draw the committee's attentions to the revised versions which were circulated by Dawn on Wednesday. And they cover basically 6 points, which no doubt Ben will draw to our attention. Ben, the ball is in your court.
Thank you very much. Morning, everyone. Yeah, so what we're looking for here is we're just asking for approval of the, we call it the RSO annual report and statement of accounts. The statement of accounts you've already seen. It came to you last month, so hopefully that's half the job for you a little bit. The annual report you're seeing for the first time here. The report is done in line with SITFA guidance. It's there to support the statement of accounts. Audit-wise, it's not audited, but the auditors, Ernst & Young, do just check it for consistency, but it's not audited in its own right. Statement of accounts wise, I mean, we're happy obviously to take questions on both. Statement of accounts, we have changed slightly, certainly not in a material way, to, for want of a better word, appease auditors. Also on some points that have been raised to us. I know Councillor Shelling's had a few that we've corrected. Really, it's quite a standard report now because we do this every year, obviously, and a lot of the wording does come from SITFA. So to break it into the segments, there's the scheme administration area. This will be as it's been reported to you monthly, so there's no surprises in there. The management and financial performance section, again, you actually see this monthly, so there should be no surprises in there, as well as the investment policy and performance, obviously gets reported to you at the investment subcommittee. So again, there shouldn't be any surprises in there. Again, audit-wise, we are meeting with the Cambridge auditors Thursday next week, and that is for the first discussion on the ISA 260, which is the accounting report. Fingers crossed, certainly not heard anything. It should be a very clean report. They've no issues. Unofficially, they've already looked for all this. So yeah, it's looking good. Officially, we haven't got the word on that until Thursday. It will look like next week. With that in mind, I'm quite happy to open up to any questions you may have. As Terry alluded to, sorry for the late second document. There is no material changes in there. We have highlighted those sections out to you. Nothing major that we wouldn't expect. So I'm happy to open up for questions. Me and Fiona will obviously try and answer any we can here. If we can't, we'll happily take them away and get back to you. Or if at a later date you spot anything, maybe a typo, something like that, we're happy to take those over email and we'll action those.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Shellings, Mike.
Thank you. Chairman, I've got a number of points going through into the major document, but dealing with the first paper first. 4.6, investment return was -5.7, and the benchmark return was -3.3, and that is just a continuation of, in my view, poor performance, which bedevils the investment history of this fund. That's just a point. But moving to 4.7, we have a note there that investment income decreased from 45 to 34. What I wondered was whether we could have any indication as to what the projection is for this year, because although Tesco's has now said it's going to pay its dividend, I know a number of major firms have said that they're going to halt dividends, and I wonder if we have any sense of what impact that will have on our investment returns.
Yeah, thank you. Paul, I don't know if that's one you want to come in from the investment area. It's certainly something we will be looking at when we do our budgeting process, which will be starting in November for the next year. But yes, it's certainly something we need to look at.
Yes, Ben, quite happy. We will certainly look at that, Councillor Shellings, and I think you've alluded to some of the issues around income in the current financial year, but simply, yes, we'll do a piece of work and feed that back to you in due course.
So basically, we have no indication at this stage as to what the likely investment income is going to be for the current year.
It's, as you know, the investment subcommittee, we report on a quarterly basis, and it is always a look back. We know that there are pressures across all the different asset allocations in terms of income, if it's property rentals, if it's dividend income, and obviously yields on fixed income have been hit. So yes, I would say that it is difficult to forward look, but we certainly can do a piece of work with all of our managers to get their latest feelings on it as an aggregate rather than individual piecemeal discussions.
Yeah, because somewhere in the report, and I can't say where, there's a statement to say that we are a going concern and will be for the next 3 years. And I wonder the extent to which losing, I would estimate 2/3 of our investment income. And I have no basis for that estimate, but making figures up is one thing an economist is good at.
Sorry, could I come in there, please?
Yeah,
because obviously in the admin report where we looked at investment income, we did say 30% income decline projected for current year, following conversations with managers.
I think that's very optimistic.
I will say that was following direct conversations with our major managers.
Yeah, but you had those before we went into second wave. And anyway, my question is, at what stage do we start going cash negative?
Yeah, we'll look at it if I may. I mean, just coming in there, bear in mind that the pension fund is a very long-term vehicle. It's not looking at a single year in isolation.
No, but Paul, that won't work. Cash negative, either we are or we're not.
Yeah,
and the fact that we're a 20 or a 40 or an 80-year horizon doesn't affect whether I'm running out of cash today. What have I got in my purse?
Yes, but
cash flows we do run daily, and we're always looking at our estimates. So as soon as we get to a point where, you know, we may have to change the investment strategy, we should be straight on it. To give you an idea of when that might happen now, it's a little bit more difficult, but certainly the process is there that we would know when that would be.
Okay, Ben, could we speak offline on this?
Yeah, of course, more than happy. Yeah,
good. And a final point, Chairman, on this section in 11, it says that we've got to have done made public inspection available for the first working day of September. And have we done that? And how are we doing for the Pension Fund's annual report for the 1st of December, please? Yeah,
so the first date, September. So the draft accounts have been published and on the website for the public to see. The second point, the fact we've got this draft to you, where are we, 9th of October. We've got no problem for hitting the second deadline.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Richard, Councillor Robertson, question, please.
Yes, it's on the same issue of the income level in 4.7 in particular. Clearly, the investment income must have decreased substantially during the year before COVID came into and lockdown came into force. I don't remember being aware of that. So what is behind that?
Yeah, Paul, I may have to ask you to jot in, but if I give an idea, I believe up until the third quarter, we were actually performing quite well, and it's that final quarter that has seen the drop. I'd also be aware that you need to look at your investment income as alongside your market return, because a lot of fund managers are acting to try and get you the best possible market value return, not necessarily pay an income within the year.
Yeah, if I can just come in on this liquidity issue. The pension fund has quite a high liquid asset allocation. And what the fund has been doing in recent years is actually moving more into the illiquid premium. And illiquid assets is where you tie in for a longer period of time, but you should generate a higher return over time. And you really can't measure in single years. The strategy is a strategy over many years. Now, in terms of income profiles, the income shown in the accounts, we have to remember that sometimes with the pooled funds, you get a unit price, which is a combination of capital and revenue, and that is all put into a price. That's not necessarily shown as income because it's not necessarily split out. So it is very difficult to look at these numbers in isolation. You have to look at them in the wider perspective. We're talking later on about an asset allocation change, and when we talk about that, I think I can perhaps expand a little bit more on that particular topic. But cash flow negative, if you're talking about the change between the fund account in itself from contributions offset against paying pensions, when that becomes negative, that is different to looking at the profile of investments. Investments is quite fluid. It can work in many ways. It can support the fund in many ways. And at the moment, if the fund needed liquidity, it could achieve that liquidity very, very easily. So I think it's perhaps a topic that we will put on for a future agenda to talk about, so that there is clarity on what we mean when we're looking at cash flow negative and the impact of requiring investments to subsidize the payment of pensions because contributions are no longer adequate to meet that in-year demand.
Yeah, fund account wise on its own, contributions are still outplay and benefits in. So we're getting more money in than we are being paying out.
As I
Sure.
recall it, it's about 4 million.
Net growth.
Yeah, and there's a big dependency on transfers
Yeah.
in, transfers out, and that's kind of demand led really. Yeah, at the moment things are okay. And at the point where things do change, then we have to look at our investment strategy.
So I think what you're saying is that, well, two things. One is that there was a change in the level of cash payments, dividends payments by companies in the fourth quarter. Our anticipation that the cash flow during that quarter was not achieved. Our anticipated cash inflow was not achieved. But that the other point you're making is that we're now looking at capital growth, capital gains, rather than dividend income as part of our investment strategy. And therefore, if we ever wanted to, presumably we would realize some of those capital gains when we need to. Well, obviously that's a different way of looking at it, but it achieves the same sort of thing, yes, as long as you get the capital gains to replace the dividends.
Yeah, and I think that's the point really. You need to look at your investment income as well as your market value return, which is what Paul was saying really. And obviously we have to follow the SIPFA guidance in the way we set out the accounts, but it's that investment income line can be quite misleading really if you don't look at it alongside the market value return.
Okay.
I'm sorry to prolong this, but two points. First of all, there is a difference when you start selling assets in order to equal up your cash flow. And secondly, can I suggest a minor rephrasing of your expression, which was, when that happens, then we will. And I think we should be looking at it now. We need our thought processes sorted out, and you may well have this, so that when that situation happens, and I think it could come much more quickly, because if we have a stock market fall as wave 2 comes along, so that there's market increases, it turns out to be mythical and stuff at the end of rainbows. So I think we need our policies, our contingency policies sorted out very soon.
Yeah, may I just allay your fears slightly? We talked about the net addition on the fund account that there is in March 2020, 3.8 million surplus that then gets reinvested.
Yeah,
that's quite a lot of money, really. It's going to take a number of years to actually get to a zero or a negative position. Investment income for March 2020 was 35 million. There's a lot of provision in there, just in that income figure alone, to meet the demand without having to sell assets. So I don't think the fund is in any risk of being forced to sell assets in the near term. But we do.
I'll see you in April 21.
Happy to
just
discuss
to add to that,
then,
Paul,
Mike.
if I can. There's also we hold quite a bit of cash in our account as well. So we it's not a panic straight away. There is quite a large buffer.
Yeah, but I'm a master at panicking early.
I think there's up to about 100 million in our cash account, isn't there?
I think there was.
There was. We've spent that, Mr. Chairman.
You've spent that, have you?
Christmas is coming.
You never tell me about these things.
Yeah, we do. We remember we put that into the infrastructure fund, which in itself generates good inflation-related returns. So
that's fine.
I certainly would allay any fears on the cash management projections going forward. I'm not seeing anything there of any immediate risk, but Councillor Stellings is absolutely right to raise the point. We are in a period where we should remember this has been a year of extreme liquidity stress for some periods of the year. In fact, we had it. It is interesting that when things are going well, you don't actually spot it, but when markets fall as fast as they did under COVID, then liquidity is a strain, and I absolutely take that on board. But we were able to steer through that quite comfortably, although it didn't necessarily feel it at the time.
Thank you, Paul. I don't see any other questions. Anybody else like to speak on this? If not, I'll go to the recommendation. If I may.
Sorry, Chairman. Are we just dealing with the cover paper, or are we dealing with the report of the Cambridgeshire County Council Pension Fund?
I was dealing with the whole, but I'm more than happy now to take questions on the report itself.
Right. Shall I continue, Chairman?
You may.
Page 137. This is not a contentious point, you'll be pleased to know, but we say there towards the bottom, penultimate paragraph, a layer of equity protection has been put in place as well as currency hedging to reduce currency risk. Absolutely understand that, but it might be comforting to people of a nervous disposition such as I if we did say in there that we don't actually do that for speculation, currency speculation.
Yeah, for risk, okay, for risk management purposes, yeah.
Sorry?
For risk management purposes, yes.
Yeah. We're not gambling. On page 142, third paragraph, primary rate includes an allowance of 0.6% of the pensionable pay for the fund's expenses. How much of that do we use up?
It's actually determined from the actual cost, so it's not just the admin costs, as you know, like the pension service. It's all of the sort of the consultancy, etc., around it as well. So it's determined from the true cost by the actuary.
Sorry, I didn't understand that.
Yes, so at each valuation, the actuary looks back at what the administrative cost has been and puts in an appropriate amount on each employer contribution rate for the cost.
So it's driving by the rear view mirror.
To an extent, yes. I mean, obviously there would be, if there's something which they know is going to be coming along, which is going to increase it, there would be an element of that as well. But generally, it's looking back at what the costs have been.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Page 151, annual pensioner payroll. Write-off amount as percent of payroll is 0.07%, which is, you know, a very small figure. But this is recovery of overpayments of pension. We've spent something over 200,000 on this over the last 4 years. 164. Oh, that was my cash negative point. Won't go there again, you'll be pleased to know. 167. We've had a policy for some considerable time of reducing the proportion of our investments in equities. And I note over 1920, in spite of that, equities went up by 2%. Don't know if Paul wants to comment on that.
You talk about listed equities.
The chart below shows the strategic asset allocation at the start and close of the financial year.
Okay, I haven't actually got the right page here. What is it, Ben?
I think if I may come in, I think it was we put more into passive, did we? From we sold.
Sorry, Chairman, didn't hear.
I believe we sold off an asset and put it into passive as a holding factor.
Yeah,
right.
There were a number of changes that we've done, Mike, as a part of the asset allocation change. Remember that we're moving significantly more into alternatives. Just as an aside, it was, and I'm sure the chairman will allude to this, I do believe in the interviews when we asked, when questions were asked about what would you do to improve the asset allocation, and I think quite a few of them said put more money into the alternatives arena.
But over that year, they went down by 3%.
Yeah, sorry. This is obviously what will play into the March 2020 figures is the relative performance of each asset class. So even if you, well, first of all, you make the strategic allocation and then you actually make the move, what happens thereafter is, of course, there is also then a actual, you know, each asset class will perform in different ways. And equities did incredibly well relatively at that point. But of course, as you're aware, post March 2020, things started going in different directions.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we certainly got our eye on the strategic allocation and are bringing it down. Indeed, of course, I've just made another agree to take it down further to 55% as well. We're mindful of that, and it is moving in the right direction now.
Good. Just 4 more quick points, Chairman. Page 170, just to point out that on the chart there, investment return compared to local authority universe, our equity, so this is performance, our equities were better than the local authority universe, which I find surprising, but never mind. Then on page 171, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines in black, and I can't tell t'other from which. Can somebody send me something which tells me which line is which benchmark fund, local authority, average, etc. Currencies on page 173, over the 12-month period to March 20, sterling depreciated by 2.6%. I am unable to reproduce that number, and I'd like someone, I imagine this is Peter, to rework that number and confirm to me that that is in fact correct, because I don't think it is.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Yes. And then we've got this paragraph at the bottom of 173. Taken together, the macro and earnings environment is as challenging as it could ever be. This year, blah, blah, blah. We expect strong growth for 2021 that could ultimately return us to pre-COVID-19 GDP. I wonder if they should be given an opportunity to refresh that in the light of the current COVID situation.
Yes, I think that's a fair point. Yeah.
Chairman, I'm sorry to say that's all I've got on that item.
Oh, a short brief this time then, Mike.
Absolutely.
Fine by me.
Any questions raised, please, by Councillor Shering's observations at all, and recommendations, I believe. Well, I've nothing to add to this. If I may therefore go back to the overall recommendation, which can be found on page 127. As a committee, we're asked to approve the draft annual report and note the statement of accounts of the pension fund for the 2019-20 financial year. Are we happy to agree?
Aye.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands. Thank you very much. That concludes that particular agenda item itself.
Thank you.
Can I now turn to agenda item number 10, which can be found on pages 219 to I think it's more than 226. It goes on to quite a long chain, but anyway, you can find on page 219, employers admissions and cessation report. And Corey, I think you're leading on this one.
I am, thank you, Chairman. A very straightforward report here, just recommending that the committee note the contents of the report and approve the sealing of the relevant admission agreements. There are 6 admission bodies coming into the fund. They're all transferee admission bodies, so the committee does not have a discretion over allowing them into the fund. It must allow them in if they've signed up to the admission agreement, which they all have. And there are also details of 12 bodies that have ceased participation in the fund. All of them were either pass-through agreements or have had another scheme employer agree to take on the liabilities. So there's been no need to collect any deficit payments in relation to those cessations. I've got nothing else to add to the report, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Corey. Are there any questions, please?
I just wanted to ask, if I may, Peterborough Limited, that's a very grandiose name. Is it anybody in particular?
That is a subsidiary that Peterborough City Council has set up as a trading arm to do certain activities. So they'll be moving some of that into that company.
I thought so. I thought it must be something to do with the council. Yeah, thank you.
I think they've used an operating name of Aragon or something like that, but Peterborough Limited is the official name.
No further questions. Recommendation is twofold. The Pension Funding Committee are admitting 4 bodies and the cessation of 8 bodies. Are everybody happy to agree? Thank you very much indeed. Well, that concludes part 1 of our meeting today. For members of the public now, we are about to go into what is called private session. And unfortunately, I have to close the meeting to yourselves. But to do that, I have to have agreement from the committee members. The final 2 items of the agenda are exempt from publication, so the committee will need to decide whether to exclude the public and press from consideration of this report on the grounds that the report contains exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1 of the Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended, and that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. May I ask if there is a general consensus in support of the recommendation so that the committee can take it now, or if anyone disagrees, please use the raised hands function now or indicate on the screen. So all in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The committee will now go into private session.